Hi, everyone. Welcome to the IHA webinar. I'm Julie McKinney. I'm just letting people come into the Zoom room here, and we'll start in just a minute. This is Community Food Giving Program, the nuts and bolts of building a program with David DeLeon. And we will get started in a few minutes, just letting everyone come in. All right. Welcome, everyone. Okay, well, we will get started. And I will just say this one more time. Welcome to IHA's webinar. This is about a community food giving program. And David DeLeon here is going to talk about the nuts and bolts of building a program. We are really excited to have him. And I will introduce David in a few minutes, but I just wanted to first go through a few quick housekeeping. You've heard this all before. But you will all be muted during the webinar. If you're welcome to use the chat to make comments or tell who you are, where you're from. But if you have questions, if you could use the Q&A box on the lower right, that would be great. David's going to answer questions during the last 10 minutes or so of the hour. And you can see the support email. If you have any technical difficulties, just email support@healthliteracysolutions.org. This will be recorded and posted on our webinar page on the Health Literacy Solutions Center site. And you'll get an email after the webinar with a link to a quick online evaluation. If you're looking for CE credits, you will have to do that evaluation and submit it, and then your certificate will be emailed to you. So I think that's it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask us in the chat about about technical stuff. But I think that's all the housekeeping. And now I have the great pleasure to introduce David DeLeon, who has a title that we probably all would like to have, Recreation Manager. Can't wait to hear more about that. David has his business degree from Azusa Pacific University and currently works for the city of La Habra, where he oversees special events, social service programs, and serves as a liaison to local nonprofits, business, and state government. He's known for his ability to bring people together to build stronger connections across communities and improve the infrastructure that's needed. David serves on the Friends of Families Health Center Board of Directors and is president of the Better Life Through Sport Foundation. He's received numerous leadership awards and been recognized for his work in communities. David, we are really excited to have you with us today and to hear your talk about the Community Food Giving Program. So with that, I will turn it over to you, and we'll hear from you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Julie. And it's a pleasure to speak with you today. And I hope that during the seminar, the presentation, that you'll learn a little bit about me and a little bit about the efforts that were put together in order to build a community food giving program, but mostly how to be able to assess whether or not you have one in your community or whether you want to build one in your community. Can you move the next slide, please? So the thing that I want to first preface this before we actually dive in, I should have probably shared this. One of the reasons that I was inspired to begin to focus in on why this was so important was I'm a byproduct of community food giving programs. My mom was a single mom raising 4 children, and we were living in East Los Angeles, and we were limited on what resources we had available to us. And so we had to rely on the faith community and the generosity of our neighbors in order to, some days when obviously there wasn't food on the table. So I spent my last 36 years in the field of recreation. And while it sounds like a lot of fun, and it is, our motto is you work hard, you play hard, but really it's a different kind of pressure that you are in, because you find that in many times you're positioned where the community itself is reliant on your expertise and the resources that you're able to establish in order to be success, to help serve their needs. And so I took it really a step further. One of the things that was not shared and I didn't put in my bio is I'm actually very actively involved in soccer at a national and international level. And I've been fortunate enough to have attended a number of 6 World Cups. I'm going to Qatar this November. But the reason why I got involved, as much as I love the sport, what I loved about the sport was that it built community. So it took me in places where small villages in Brazil, I've been down to South Africa in some small villages, as well as all around Scandinavia and Europe. And what you find is that the needs of neighborhoods are all the same. The wants of parents and what they would like for the children is all the same. What it really comes down to is that how you're able to establish the models to be able to produce these kinds of programs. And so that was my inspiration to continue doing this work. And I've been involved with it for over 20 years, specifically on this subject, but spent really the last 15 years in refining it and building the program that we have here in La Habra, and now working with the city of Buena Park and the city of Fullerton to help maximize their community food giving programs. And the reason that's important is because those are neighboring cities with La Habra. And as a result, if we can help create a sustainable environment for them, then what that helps do is, hopefully that'll help with the background noise if there's something. That will help keep the needs of the immediate community in the community, as opposed to having to go to other communities. And that's really what should be done. Is every neighborhood, every community should have a program within their area, so that you can help service the immediate needs of the people around your area. So anyway, let's go ahead and get right into it. When I talk about a food insecurity program, you got to figure out whether or not you actually need a program. Now, it sounds like a dumb question, but it really isn't. Sometimes there's existing programs that are in your neighborhood, they just are not communicated. Or there might be a program that has it's more regional, and you just, again, don't know about it. So really, to find out whether or not you need a program, you should reach out to the schools and the school districts. They are the ones who really have a good pulse on the kids that are actually underserved within their schools, and so can help you better understand whether or not there is an immediate need. There's a tendency for schools to take this challenge on themselves, and that's tough because their primary focus is learning, but having kids well fed with good food is really an essential part of learning. And so really, reach out to your schools and school districts and determine through that what the need is. The other one is you want to reach out to your city's parks and recreation departments. And in the smaller cities, they're really easy to work with because there's not as much bureaucracy. But when you get into the larger ones, there tends to be a lot of bureaucracy in there. And so what you need to do is find a champion within that organization to help you identify whether there's or not a need. Sometimes, believe it or not, as much as I love my brothers and sisters in the field, they are not always well connected with the community as I had to be. So I think the thing is don't be frustrated by it. It's just because, again, there's everybody works in their own silo, and sometimes that, while it's important to their community, is not something they're focused in on for a variety of reasons. The other group that I would reach out to is your local child care centers. There's a tendency not to really, when they see an entity out there that's providing child care services and it's not a government program, there's a tendency to think, well, they're fine. Well, again, it's the same thing as they may be servicing a family that maybe is on the cusp of being homeless, or the cusp of having stresses involved with utilities and housing insecurity. So really reaching out to child care centers is really an important part of determining whether or not you need a program in your community. Obviously, the easy one is to reach out to nonprofits. I mean, they'll know pretty much whether or not there's an existing program or whether you actually need one. I say that redundantly, like, do we actually need a program? You will, I guarantee you will, but you have to ask yourself in a way so that you learn about it. The last group, and this is the most important group, is your faith community. One of the things that we did early on, in fact, it was 2007, we were just about, knowing that we were going to have some kind of financial crisis. And I knew that in order for us to be able to serve our community, I was going to need their help. And so I actually wrote a letter out. We used to have telephone books then, but I looked on the telephone book, got all the addresses of all of the churches in town. There were 38, and drafted a letter, invited them to a meeting, and they showed up. The pastor showed up, and we talked about the needs of the community. It was that simple letter that brought them to the table. And I can tell you, in the last years since we've begun that program, they are so stitched into the community fabric that I can't even imagine what it would be like to not work with the faith community. And so I want to say that a lot of times each church tends to stand in their own four walls and stay within that four walls. Sometimes it's going to require you to really remind them that churches are there to serve people. And I say that very respectfully, but you remind them of that. And the pastors know that. It's them trying to communicate that to the church members. So in regards to whether or not you need a program, these are the bullet points I would point out to. Next slide, please. Once you look at that, you really got to take inventory of your existing programs. There are programs in your community. What you want to know are these four critical parts. Are they communicating to each other? A lot of times that they're so involved with acquisition of food, acquisition of inventory, that they say, oh yeah, everybody knows about us. Well, everybody might be just the segment of the population that actually receives it. So I think the real important thing is to find out whether or not they're communicating with each other. The other thing is, what is the capacity they have? That's another critical area. There's a tendency to look at, well, all we can do is provide dry foods, or all we can provide is, we can't provide milk. The thing is that simply giving food to a community that's underserved, that's not really the answer. What we need to do is be able to produce, or to have an inventory of food that's going to be well balanced. I know that sounds easy to say and easy to wish, but I can tell you this, and I'm sure you've heard this before, that 40% of the food that is produced goes in the landfill. That is absolutely true. I did not think that was true. I thought maybe it was over exaggeration until I was able to visit our local regional food bank, and I saw the size of their warehouse, and it was just massive. And the number of pallets of food they receive every day. So really, the thing is that when you look at capacity, you got to almost prepare yourself that if you do become organized, you are going to have received, and you are able to touch on these points, you are going to receive a greater amount of inventory that you normally wouldn't have. So really knowing the capacity of all of the local food banks is going to be really critical. And the other part of it is where they're getting the foods. Again, I think the most important thing for you to do is to determine whether or not there is a regional food bank. Here in Orange County, there's Second Harvest Food Bank. We also have the Orange County Food Bank. But I understand that the Second Harvest motto is actually sprinkled all over the country. So if you are interested in learning about whether or not there's a regional food bank, you can call a Second Harvest Food Bank. I don't have their number, but they're located in inventory, and they're located in Irvine, and you can go on the website, and I got to imagine they can help you identify a regional food bank in your area. And the reason why that group is so important, they have a tendency to work with Costco and Sam's Club and a few others that a few others that are big box retailers, and they will be the ones to be able to tell you whether or not they're the recipients of food. So I think finding out where they get their food from is really critical. The other part of it is food procurement capacity. You know, that's the one thing. And when we started organizing our event here, or our program here, you know, we were primarily getting our food from local grocery stores. Now we do receive it from Costco, from Sam's Club, because we're positioned in a way that Second Harvest Food Bank can't get this far out to be able to, you know, pick up the food and get it re-inventoried and then sent out again. So we actually we have, I think, 17 or 18 different partners now that we receive food from. And I tell you, we get 10 pallets of food a day here. And so what we're now doing is issuing out food to other distribution centers, because what we found is that acquisition of food is not the most important part, because that's going to be easy if you have capacity. It's going to be distribution points. Next slide, please. Again, you know, what I did in the beginning was I wanted to unify the group, have a more holistic approach. You know, I expected not everybody to be on board or to listen, because there's, again, you know, people intend to work on their silos, and so they're very protective of their walls. And I needed to assure them that I wasn't interested in tapping into their resources. I was actually interested in helping them get more food. Again, I reemphasize the determining of where the food comes from, and the regional food bank. Next slide, please. So once you are able to identify those things, and those are the traditional food banks, before we actually get into how to create the distribution, I got to talk about another part of this, and that's gleaning. You know, gleaning is another source of food that we were able to acquire. It just so happens that La Habra is butted up against La Habra Heights, which is at one time, well, this whole area was once citrus groves. Now it's a bedroom community, and you'll see some of the groves here and there, but in La Habra Heights, there still are groves. They also, that was the founder of the Haas avocado, was the mother tree is actually there in La Habra Heights. And so gleaning is being able to organize a group of people to go and pick off the trees. And we had a young lady that was a high schooler who very intelligent and very inspiring, and she had a program, a nonprofit she established called Food for Thought. And what she did was she mobilized her high school fellow classmates to go out and pick this fruit from the trees, and then also work with the homeowners. And I'll tell you, we still get on season, we could get tons of fresh fruits, from oranges to lemons to tangelos to what is it, grapefruits. And then, as well as many of the people up there have they have gardens, and so they'll have fresh vegetables. And that really was the spirit of what our intent were in the beginning, when I talked about, you know, the kind of food that you're really interested in getting. There's a tendency to be satisfied with food with long shelf life. The one thing that I want to remind you of is that the people that really need the food are probably the people that really need the healthiest food possible. And so we reverse the model and saying, we're just not going to provide food. We're going to provide them the healthiest food we possibly can. And so what we have now in our gleaning program is the freshest fruit that we would get even from the farms, because sometimes the farms are picked so early, by the time they get to the grocery store, they get ripened. These are ripened right from there. So having a gleaning program and working with your local Future Farmers of America, or even establishing a gleaning program, if you know that there are people in your community that have fruit trees or have vegetable gardens, that is a tremendous source of getting healthy food into the hands of the people that are most needed. And so what I would say is that as you begin to look at your procurement process, that you always keep a mindful eye for all of these other opportunities as well. It was a program that was introduced to me about 5 years ago. I didn't kind of get it at first, but now I look at it and I can't imagine being without it anymore. Next slide, please. So when we did our, and this is a case study that we had here in La Habra, and this is kind of where we start getting in why we needed to have one, a community food giving program. We found that fourth graders in our school district with the third highest obesity rate, had the third highest obesity rate. 80% of our children were our free lunch programs, as you can see here. This is a critical part, many families relies on processed food and from local food banks. We wanted to change that. Our key thing is we wanted to create a real system. And I made reference to the fact of the 18 local partners. You can see that when we started kind of looking at our program, these are the things that we had to measure to be able to determine whether or not we actually needed to have a community food giving program. It wasn't so much that we didn't know we needed it. We needed to show evidence that we needed it. And this helped us be able to do that. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. There we go. You know, the things to consider, you know, you want to inspire people to want to be part of the initiative. You know, I always talk about make people want to be part of this movement. Not make people do it, make people want to be part of this movement. That's one of the things when it comes down to collaboration that I really focus in on. I'm going to convince you that your involvement in this program is the greatest thing for you. It's the greatest thing for the things that you want to do. I'm not going to do it and tell you that. I'm going to show you. And that's really why people want to be part of it, because I always understood that people want to be part of something bigger than themselves and something that's going to contribute in a positive way. Some people want to contribute financially. Some people want to just feel the sense of giving. Some people just need something to do. So I think understanding people, understanding what their needs and wants are, is really a determining factor on how effective you can produce a community food giving program. You know, the other part of it is that, you know, just because I think it's a good idea, I got to make sure that it's relevant to them. You know, some people are volunteers and it's in the spirit in their DNA. And if they see it, you're committed to life. But others, it's just part of their job. It's part of what they want to do. So there's nothing wrong with understanding that, you know, we need to feed that person or give those people the things that they need in order to do their job. And so if that means they have to service a particular part of the community that has a need for food, then you help facilitate that, because in return, not only you're going to get that investment from that individual, but they have to be able to be a willing participant in that. When you do seek funding or you do look for other partners, or you want to prove to people that you're a legitimate organization, that you're able to use them as a reference. So that's critical, because, you know, and I make reference to big box retailers. When you start working with big box retailers, got to remember they're being approached by so many different organizations that are wanting to serve their community. And you don't want to put them in a position where they have to pick and choose. What you want to do is you want to put them in a position that says that they're contributing to their local community. And so that means that as you begin to kind of shake out your programs, and this is where it's critical for you to help them understand why it is important to work collectively together, is that you don't want to put that retailer, that manager, or that person who's in charge of distribution in a position where they got to pick and choose. You want them to, the bottom line, what they need to do is they need to get the food out because they get other food coming in. And you want to make that process as easy as possible so that they want to continue to give you food. And again, it goes back to, I can't reemphasize it again. Is there a regional procurement nonprofit collecting food? If there is, don't try to take away from them. Try to see where their vulnerabilities are, where you can help enhance their operation, because like I said, when we work with Second Harvest Food Bank, because we're the furthest city in North Orange County, and Orange County, we're the northernest city, it was hard for them to get from their trucks from their main location in Irvine, which is about 15 miles away, which is through Orange County traffic, up to Costco up here, the borders our neighboring county, and then back in time in order to pick up other deliveries. So basically what we were able to do, again, position ourselves, say, hey, listen, how about if we collect that food and then we go ahead and redistribute it, and you let us know who you want us to distribute it to, and we'll find other distributors. And so that's how it worked. Next slide, please. So when I talk about the community food giving program, and I talk about all the things that we're talking about, there's a few things that I did not cover, and I really need to focus in on, and that is the pillars before we get into questions. So in every community there are 5 pillars, and that is government, schools, nonprofits, faith community, and business. Those are the 5 pillars in every community. There isn't a community in the country that doesn't have those. What I have often have said, that if you work with 3 of those pillars, that you would be able to increase your success rate in terms of whatever program you're involved with by at least 200%. And why I use that is because having I call it cross-pollination of siloed industries allows you to tap into the personalities of that organization. And here's a good example. There was a lab down in Irvine that was, they produced, oh gosh, I can't remember what it was. It was some kind of eye makeup, and it's very popular. It was very popular. I'm sorry, I apologize. I don't know what it is. And they're a Fortune 500 company. And they had reached out to me because they have an element of their employee organization that provides community service, and they wanted to provide backpacks for school children. And they had worked with a company called Kaboom, which is an organization I've worked with, which builds playgrounds. And so I reached out to them, or they reached out to me. I said, hey, yeah, we can probably work with you. And so I ended up visiting them at their site and realizing the site was more of a campus than it was a site. And then recognizing, that they were a Fortune 500 company. Not only did they provide us with close to 1,000 backpacks that were completely filled with educational curriculum that was focused around STEM, but they've also been a financial supporter of our community food giving program. And it was simply because they're a large company who wants to give back to the community. And really, frankly, the guy that was in charge of this is just a guy just like you and me, who has a job to do and just trying to do it. And so the thing is that we were able to turn that into a very successful relationship that is built around, what I refer to as cross-pollination, in that he has a job that he has to do that's relevant to the things that we are trying to accomplish here in La Habra. And so therefore the arrangement is mutually beneficial. And so I don't have to worry about calling him when I need something. He calls me because he has to do something. And often when we talk about marketing, I was good friends with a guy named Ron Curley, or I still am good friends with a guy named Ron Curley, who was an Olympic marathoner. And he runs a company called Runner's Image, and it's a timing company for running events. And I asked him about fundraising. I asked him about things that how do you do that? And he said to me that, David, going out and seeking out people to support your programs, it's hard in the beginning because you got to go out there and shake the bushes. But when you're successful when you can sit at your desk and they're calling you. And that's what I'm trying to say, is that as you begin to develop these different ideas and things, that really developing these relationships are what are extremely important to to developing the kind of relationships that are going to make it good for your organization, and good not only for building a community food giving program, but also for being able to support the other things you do. Because I guarantee you that as you begin to step your foot into these waters, that there's going to be a lot of other things that are going to come to surface. And so when I talk about community food giving, it's not really a hard subject. It really isn't. The thing is, you got to be able to put effort into it. But I'll tell you, it's not hard when you working with the right people, when you're working with people that are interested in the subject matter, but also that it's relevant to you and are relevant to them. So what I would say, and I think this is towards the end of my presentation, unless I read this wrong, that really collaboration is the key. Working with community partners is the key, and being able to work with the pillars. As I mentioned, it's government, schools, nonprofits, business, and faith community. Being able to engage them, even at a minimal level, is going to be critical to your success in terms of building a community food giving program. There is still much more that I can share with you, but it's probably more of a sidebar. But I have some time, in fact, quite a bit of time to be able to answer any questions. If you have any, please share them with me. Now would be a good time. I'm trying to look at the chat box.
Hi, David. I can share one of the questions that someone had. This is from Barry. In La Habra, the city served as the convener, as you said. But in other communities, if the city's not able to do that, what other neutral organizations can serve as the convener for this type of effort? And then along with that, what challenges did you have in getting organizations on board?
Okay, that's a great question, because sometimes it's hard for a city to grasp this. And so luckily I was in the position where I felt very compelled to see this through. And usually working with your Parks and Recreation department and try to find that champion in there is really critical. And if you can get that person, great, your job is a ton easier. But if you haven't, the one thing that we have is a group called the La Habra Collaborative, and we have neighboring cities that also have that, the Buena Park Collaborative, the Fullerton Collaborative, and the Placencia Collaborative. Seeing to work with those organizations would be very effective, because again, the spirit of what hopefully their intent is and hopefully their mission is to serve the community. And so you want to be able to work with organizations like that. I think one of the things that there's a tendency, and I found this with our faith community, the faith community can be very protective of their flock. There's a tendency to not feel comfortable letting people get into their membership. And what I try to do is remind them that first of all, like in the city of La Habra, we had so many people that needed their soul saved that we didn't have enough seats in our churches to be able to facilitate that number. So what I said was that, let's not focus in on our maintaining our membership. Let's focus in on doing the good work that we need to do. And really, I was able to establish an interfaith group. I called it the Love La Habra Interfaith Group, and where I met with churches on a regular basis, and the pastors got to know each other. And so we never talked about religion. We never talked about faith. What we talked about was serving people. So I think one of the things I would say is that if there's a segment of the population, an industry or a silo that that is within your organization, position yourself to be able to facilitate a meeting with them, to get them in a room and focus in on the realities of the situation, which is that, communities, our community needs help. We need help with food insecurity. We need help with housing insecurity. And we know that this is the spirit of who you are and what you represent. Can we talk about the programs that exist and talk about the things that we can leverage each other with, and let's see how we can work together. So hopefully that answers two of the questions. The last one takes a little bit of time, and that is the challenges. You know, the challenges with working with people is understanding where they're at, and understanding, you know, what their need is and what their ambitions are. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that you just got to kind of know that it's a people-centered approach. Understand what people need and what they want and what they're willing to do. And so the challenges are being able to understand that you're going to be dealing with a lot of personalities. You're going to be dealing with a lot of ideas, a lot of things. What I've done in the past is create spaces or opportunities to get people to work together. And a good example is Kaboom. I don't know if any of you heard about the Community Playground Build. It's a national organization where their mission is to build a playground within walking distance of every kid in the country. And I've worked with them for, gosh, since 2005. And we've built 8 playgrounds with them. But what it does is once you get the grant, so you get a grant from them and they're going to build a playground and they're going to, you're going to do, from the minute you get the grant, that playground will be built in 6 weeks, literally, but it'll be put together in 1 day. And the thing is that the model that they follow, the collaboration that they follow, and they drive it, brings all sorts of people together. So what I did was I used it as a grounds to be able to help people see and be part of something bigger than themselves. So what I'm saying is that if you try to change the people's ideas and convince them through verbal communication that this is the right thing to do, that's going to be tough. But if you show them and you allow them to be part of it, that is a much easier way to go. And I can tell you that we have painted murals. We have literally built 2 soccer fields using volunteer-driven organizations. And if I showed you these fields, it's Arsenio Park. You can go on Google Maps in La Habra. That field looks like it was built by a contractor. That field was 100% built. It's actually 2 very large fields. It was built 100% volunteers. So it really is creating a space where you could bring people together and show them how to work collaboratively together. That is the critical thing. Love Our Cities is another example. That is an organization that has been, that is founded in Merced, and you can go to loveourcities.com or .org, and they invite other cities to be part of their movement. It doesn't have to be just from California. I know we have Love La Habra, we have Love Fullerton, we have Love Placentia, we have Love Brea. These are all organizations that are doing good for your community, but become grounds where you can help bring in people that are like-minded, or bring in people that want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And these are the things that as an influencer, you got to position yourself to be. You see, the thing about the community food giving program, it is one of many elements that we've been able to do because we create these spaces to be able to encourage people to work together side by side. And when I talk about the pillars, that is extremely important. My role when I'm involved with these projects is to make sure that I get representation from each of those pillars to get them to participate in whatever effort that I have going on. Because I know if I do that, I have increased the likelihood of success. So hopefully that answers your question. Any other questions?
Thanks, David. That was great. Yeah, no, it's really great to hear you talk about how, you know, once you get one person on board or organization and really make them want to do it, then the others sort of want to do it too, and you work together. There is another question from Michael. Wants to know, you know, nonprofit hospitals and health centers have a requirement to meet the health needs of the communities they serve. So I guess, would you recommend reaching out to these hospitals and clinics? And if so, how did this work in La Habra?
So first of all, I want to throw a shout out to Providence St. Jude Medical Center. I mean, they've been huge partners of ours for, gosh, since 2005. 14, 15. And they were really at the forefront of investing in the neighboring communities. And so I would say that there's got to be a community benefit program within the hospitals that exist, and identifying and seeing if they do have one. If they haven't have one, they, encouraging, them to establish one, because I think that, the idea behind, from what I learned from Barry Ross and Tracy Byers, who I work with very closely, was that that there's a need to create healthier environments in the surrounding communities, because hopefully healthier people don't come to the hospital as much. And so I would say they're an extremely important partner that if you can get a conversation with, and really if you want, you can reach out to, I know that Melissa Arvizu and Peter Hernandez are involved with these two programs, and I think they have a new person, because Barry has left and is doing something else now with another organization, that they could share with you how that program works. But it's an effective tool that I would encourage you to do. The other one that I would say is the FQHC model, which is a federally qualified health center. I happen to be a board member on one, and there is more and more money coming down through the feds to be able to, federal government, to be able to support all sorts of these initiatives. The thing is that the clinics, their core business is really helping people on a medical side. But now all these other social determinants are critical to, again, the really stretching the services of the FQHCs in a way that maybe is a little beyond what their capacity is. Reaching out to your local FQHC in your community is critical. If you're part of one and you're on a board, I would encourage you to talk to your board about doing this, because I know our board is talking about it again. We already reinvest into the community, but we were going to reinvest more, because we know that in order for us, just like what Providence St. Jude has focused in on, the more healthier that we can make patients, and the better off our community is going to be. So really, as we move forward, as things continuously grow, and I know the federal government is going to sign another bill, which is going to provide more monies to be able to support the Affordable Care Act. You need to tap into those resources to help establish the kinds of relationships you need to have in order to facilitate this need. I don't mean to bring scripture in here, but the Bible always talks about there'll always be the poor, there'll always be the hungry. I think that's a fact. And the fact is that we need, as health professionals, as people in public health, we need to be able to position ourselves to be able to help service that need, and using the resources available through clinics and through hospitals is really critical. I'm suspecting that there are probably some of the health insurance companies are probably tapping into it, but I don't deal with them as much as I do with the clinics and the hospitals. So I would say yes, that is an incredible opportunity to work with that.
Thank you, David. And just to follow up on a little bit of specifics around that, when you're trying to contact an FQHC, say, to try to see if they can partner with you, who in the organization would you direct your questions to? And then I guess the same question when you're contacting a school district, say, which is also another huge entity, like what are the titles that you would contact in each of those cases?
So I think your question is a great one, is because one that is got to really understand. And let's talk about the FQHCs. So the FQHC model, in terms of its board structure, has to have, unlike any other, hospital, which is primarily people in the industry. In the FQHC model, your board has to be sprinkled up of what they call, it's kind of like members and non-members. So your members are your patients. So you have to have, I think it's 60% of your board has to be made up of someone who's a patient of your clinic. The remaining numbers have to be members that are made up of the community that you're serving. So like me, as a board member, I represent the community because of my position with the city. And so therefore, I'm not a patient, but I serve the role as a community member. Whereas we have other board members that are patients. Now they have experience. One worked at a hospital, and I think she was in the human resources department. The other one was a nurse who was in the human resources department. But we also have another board member who's not a member, who is actually a doctor. But the thing is that the board has to be made up of different represent segments of the community. It's basically what it is. So when you go to an FQHC, if you go to the CEO, he may or may not be privy to this. What I would do if I were you is I would probably lean towards reaching out to some of the board members and finding out who is on the board and sending them an email to say that, who you are and, what you represent and what you would like to do. Because it's not that the CEOs and the subordinate staff are not willing to do it. It's just that their focus is on the healthcare side. And this is something that's very new to the FQHC model. And so you may want to tap that. You may have someone that's not to say that you don't have a CEO that's not sensitive to that. If you know your CEO and he's sensitive, then approach him. I'm talking about someone who in the FQHC model just is learning, just like we are learning about everything that's happening as far as the Affordable Care Act. So it's kind of this really weird, maybe non-traditional approach, but remember, you're going in for the right reasons. I've always believed that. If you go in for something for the right reasons, then there's nothing wrong with asking. The other part of the question, in terms of, who would you approach in the school district? The superintendent, again, focused in on kids learning everything, but the critical thing about understanding about schools is they understand the importance of nutrition. So you can almost approach anybody in the district and say, we have a community food giving program that's servicing this need, or we know that you have this need. How can we help? And almost any level of that district, in terms of the superintendent, assistant superintendent, your principals of the schools, are probably good people to work with, because they already know having a kid with good nutrition at home is only going to create a more productive student during the day. And so school districts are actually pretty easy when you're coming with something that's going to help them educate children. And so what I would say in general, when you're dealing with a school district, and this is coming from 36 years of dealing with schools, that if you come in trying to sell a product, the walls are going to be up. They're going to protect the moat's going to protect them. But you come in focused on how you want to help children, how you want to help them educate children, and help them, with not only the nutritional needs, but the mental health needs of their children. They're going to be willing participants. They're going to want to listen to you, because they understand that they just can't do it themselves. This is not the same school district that I used to be involved with, 20 years ago, where, I remember hearing, we raise your children. I think they figured out that there's no one entity that does that. It is a collection of influences that help raise your children. And so therefore, asking for help, or at least someone coming for help, especially from an entity that's serving the community already, is essentially a good partner. And so I would say that you really want to tap into that resource to be able to help them do the things that they need to do in order to help educate children.
Thank you so much. So I have one more question, and then we can start winding down. This has been so helpful, David. You mentioned earlier that it was never a problem of getting the food, but the bigger problem was finding distribution points. Is that right?
Yes.
So I guess just wondering if you have any thoughts or advice on how to find and set up the distribution points.
Distribution points are fairly easy, because you just got to identify, and this is where the churches really come in. find an organization willing to take that on, because generally the distribution points are usually volunteer. And so a lot of times the churches are the easiest one because they're usually sprinkled around the community. And if you can find a church in the northern part, the western part, eastern part, and southern part of the city, then you kind of work with them to be able to get the food to them or have them pick up the food. When you talk about, so it's that simple, but what the challenge is going to be is if you create a community food giving program, you're going to find yourself with the need of refrigeration and freezer space, because when you're able to organize, literally you will get pallets of food. I can remember, I mean, we get 8 pounds of ground beef in a tube, and we'll get a pallet of that. We'll get a pallet of milk. We'll get eggs. We get all those things that need refrigeration, and these are all things that you need in order to provide a healthy, balanced diet to the recipients. So what I would say is that when you start looking at your distribution areas, start inquiring of whether or not they have access to refrigeration, or they have access to, how big of their warehouse space is, how many people they can serve. Because you don't need them to serve 500 people. If you have, 5 different churches serving 100 people, well, you're serving 500 people. And depending on the size of your community, our community, which is, 62,000, we probably serve, I mean, during the height of the pandemic, we were doing 3,000 people a week. Now it's kind of dwindled down, probably about just less than half of that. But with the price of groceries being what they are, we're still seeing people who are not necessarily the most underserved, but they're the persons that are, if we don't help them help them pay for some of their groceries, they're going to end up needing other assistance. So I think when you talk about deciding on distribution points, it's first of all, working with the churches would be great. Schools are kind of difficult only because they're highly regulated. It's not that they don't want to, they're highly regulated. And so they have to, the Food and Drug Administration really puts a clamp down on what they can serve out of their schools. So they might be a little difficult. However, they may want to allow you to use their parking lot. So I would say that community center cities, I mean, they're always willing. Boys and Girls Club, another one, would be willing, I'm sure. So it's identifying groups within your community that are serving a certain segment of the population, or that have a group, a church that is in a certain segment of the is in a certain area of your community that can serve as a distribution point and as a magnet. Doesn't mean that you only have 4. You could, depending on the size, you may need 10 or 15. But it's really just identifying and having kind of a map of how you want to be able to serve your community. And then also the last one I do want to say is working with your senior centers. I think one of the most interesting things that came to me when I went to Second Harvest Food Bank is South County tends to be the wealthiest part of our county, which is Orange County. And in meeting with the group at the Second Harvest Food Bank, they were telling me about the food insecurity in South County. And I was kind of surprised. I said, what do you mean? I said, they got a lot of rich people over there. He says, well, so many of those people didn't prepare for retirement. And so, yeah, they maybe have big houses, but they can barely afford to keep those homes. And so what they're giving, they're not getting so much of is food and medication. Wow. And that was a surprise to me. I was stunned. Mm-hmm. So it really kind of made me realize that I'm not passing judgment on anyone anymore. If you're food insecure, you're food insecure. I mean, and so I think the thing is that finding distribution points and identifying them and making sure they have the infrastructure is probably really important. And if you don't have refrigeration, don't give up there. I mean, generally, I feel that if you have good people around you and you have a good relationship in your mobilizing your pillars in your community, there will be someone or some company that will step up and provide you this refrigeration you need. I am that confident.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's neat. It's a good lesson to like not make assumptions. I think we always think of children when we think of food security. So we
Yeah,
don't think
yeah.
of seniors so much, but there's always hidden things going on in our communities.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, thank you so much. That was really helpful, and I think can give us a lot to think about with any kind of program that we're setting up, you know, even beyond food security programs. So this will be helpful if we take it also in the broader sense for setting up any kind of effort.
Yeah, and I did want to share, and I want to thank IHA for allowing me the opportunity to speak. And IHA has been good partners with me, and we've gone through this journey together. I know that the plan is to produce more webinars along the lines of social determinants of health, and if you have any suggestions on things we should talk about, or you want to get more involved with anything specific that I talked about, I would reach out to IHA and let them know. And that, like I said, they really serve a unique role in terms of being able to help communicate these messages into the community. And like I said, they've been great to work with, and I really appreciate the opportunity they've given me.
Great. Well, thank you, David. And partners like you are a big boon to IHA as well. And our members too. So I just want to tell the people joining this webinar, please do come to our site. I've just put the link in the chat. Come to the Health Literacy Solutions Center. You can go to the webinars page, which is in the Learning Lab section, and the recording of this will be available as well as others. And yeah, like David said, if you have any ideas of something you'd like us to do a webinar about, please get in touch with us. There's emails on there, and there's lots of other great resources on the Solution Center that's changing regularly. So please keep coming back. And again, big thank you to everybody joining this, and huge one to you, David, for sharing your expertise on this topic. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Bye now.